Hello and welcome to Crux Investor. Today we spoke with Joe Hamilton, who's the CEO of Unigold. They're a TSXV gold explorer with assets in the Dominican Republic. And if you want our thoughts and opinions on that conversation and indeed the company itself, you can find that at cruxinvestor.com/club, where you can also find detailed company reports, market analysis from experts from around the world, training videos, summaries of other interviews that we've done. And of course, there's a thriving community of investors sharing their thoughts and ideas with each other. And if you go and sign up for the waitlist today, you qualify to have a 7-day free trial. And of course, we want your feedback as well. So do give us a like, leave your thoughts below. And if you want to see exactly what we talked about today, take a look in the description. Mr. Hamilton, how are you, sir?
Very well. How are you this morning, Matt?
Not bad, not bad. Been a while. I haven't spoken to you since May. Obviously, lots happened since then. We're going to hear all about it. So where are you? I know where you are because I remember the image behind you.
It hasn't moved. I'm still just outside of Toronto, still sheltering in place, as it were.
Good. Have you been able to get down to site?
No, the travel to the Dominican Republic is still somewhat restricted. There are no direct flights from Canada any longer. We have to go through the U.S. to get there. That poses some difficulty. But we've managed to start a drill program and carry on and do our work that we need to do remotely. So there's workarounds.
I saw, and we're going to talk about it in a minute. But I tell you what, given we haven't spoken for a while, so for people new to the story and for the people who saw the last interview, can you give us that 1-minute overview? I'll pick it up from there.
Oh, love to. I mean, we're doing work in the Dominican Republic. Our concession, the Nieta concession, is about 20,000 hectares in the DR. We've been concentrating over the last 5 years on a small portion of it around the Candelones area. We've defined resources there, and we continue to expand those resources and find higher grade mineralization. So our exploration programs are ongoing, and we expect over the course of the next 12 months that we'll have more information as far as technical studies are concerned, as well as drill results.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Immediately after we spoke in May, you went and raised some money, about $6 million in the end, was it?
Yes.
Easy?
It's always easy to raise money when the market is hot and the gold price is moving up in the right direction. So, but it's never easy to raise money with, in any market, finding new shareholders and, convincing existing shareholders to participate as well. So we managed to supersize the deal, as it were. We ended up with far more orders than we were looking for initially. We did stop. We probably could have raised $10 million at the time, but felt, $6 million was sufficient for us to meet our goals over the next 12 to 18 months. So the board, in their wisdom, cut it off there. We are doing very well as far as that's concerned. Our current drill program will probably consume about $3.5 million of that over the next 8 to 12 months.
Okay, so I do want to get into the plan in a second, but maybe let's hit these news items first. Okay, so you put out a drill result of just over 9 grams at 30 meters back in August. I think the market reacted well to that, and then it kind of went very quiet, and then you've just released some quite good drill results, and the market seems indifferent. So, frustrated?
Frustrated, yes. The drill result, the 30 meters at 9 grams that we put out in early August, that was the last drill hole from our October to March drill program. It was sitting in the lab, throughout the COVID shutdown, and we just got the final results in August and put that out, and it ended up being the best hole to date on the project. That's frustrating, knowing that there's, that COVID came in just as we were hitting stride, as it were. We started drilling again shortly after that in mid-August. But now most of the labs are backed up with in their analytical sections trying to get samples out the door. Our first result from our new round of drilling we just put out last week. So there's been, it's sort of 8 weeks after we started drilling. That kind of a delay, I think, makes people lose their patience somewhat when there's lots of other noise in the market as far as other results coming up from other programs. So, but that result was equally good. That was 9 meters at almost half an ounce, a little bit over half an ounce of gold per ton. Very consistent mineralization again. But now that the pipeline is full, we've completed 12 drill holes at site. Those are all in the lab. We've released results from one of them. So the rest of those will be coming out over the next 2 to 4 weeks. steady flow of information now, and I expect we'll see much the same kind of intercepts and much the same kind of grades.
Right. So how are you going to attack? Remind me how you're going to attack this going forward. Obviously, you've raised some money, and you're going to be you're a geologist, so drill. But to what end? What is the information that you're seeking, and why are you building it that way?
That's I could probably go on for 30 minutes, but I'll try to I'll try to encapsulate it. There's two parts. As we talked about in May, there was a small oxide portion of the deposit. It was about 100,000 ounces, but formed a starter operation. The intention was to complete an economic study on that by the end of the year. We've started that work. We put out a resource upgrade, or rather, we upgraded the resources from inferred to measured and indicated in the oxide portion. That release went out at the end of August. Technical report was filed about 10 days ago. That sets us up for doing the PEA or PFS on the oxide portion. And so we'll execute that. We'll get that done in the first quarter of next year. In the meantime, we're drilling the sulfides, which is the larger portion of the deposit and higher grade as well. We're continuing to drill and expand those. The drill program that we put together between October and, it was truncated in March, but between October and March was really an infill drill program intended to move quite a bit of those sulfides into the measured indicated category. This drill program is focused on expanding the resources and doing step outs to depth and along strike to try to put more tons in the bank and try to expand that. Our objective by the end of the year is to get the deposit up to 2 million ounces at a grade between 5 and 7 grams per ton. And we've certainly got, by that time, we'll have about 30,000 meters of drilling that we will have completed. In addition to, or in excess, the last resource estimate we put out on the sulfides was in 2015. So we've done 30,000 meters of drilling since then. We'll upgrade that resource estimate probably in the first quarter next year.
Right. Okay. So you raised 6 million. You're going to spend 3 million on drilling. You're going to have to be really careful about how you apply that capital, right? You've got to kind of create value in the marketplace. You've got to do things, or you probably want to do things the right way technically as a geologist to kind of give you the answers to the questions, but you still need to be talking to the market. So the assays are being delayed. That means that some people perhaps lose interest and they do go off elsewhere. I think you referred to earlier. So how are you going to manage the small amount of capital that you've got to balance up those two things?
Well, a lot of that comes down to drill positioning. It comes down to where do you position the drill holes for the biggest bang. We've spent quite a bit of time. We understand these systems. We understand the structural controls. We understand where they're going. We've got over a 90% hit rate on our drilling. We know how to target the mineralization. So the objective then is to continue to do that, but with ever increasing step outs so we can show the potential for the system. This system starts at about 50 or 60 meters below surface. We've only drilled it down to about 350 meters below surface. It's still fairly shallow from an underground mining standpoint. These type of systems, these type of epithermal systems, if you look at similar systems in Mexico or Chile, Peru, or even Japan, New Zealand, these systems generally have 700 meters to 1,000 meters of vertical extent. We've got, maybe 300 meters defined. I think the chances are pretty good that we'll be able to pull that down another 300 meters and double the resource that we've got.
Right. Okay. Explain to people why you're looking at this as, the oxides versus the sulfides, and one's low grade, one's high grade. You've got to create value. You just said it yourself. So you've got to keep it simple for folks, so how do you go about creating the most amount of value? And it comes back to the same question. Where do you spend your money? Why not focus on one rather than the other?
Well, the oxide portion of the deposit's fairly small. It's where it outcrops and it's where it it's tropical weathering. It's probably only a 4-year production profile, but it's low-hanging fruit in that it brings on a lot of cash flow, which at this point in time, I would suspect the cash flow will be I would say an order of magnitude, but double our current market cap once we define that project. The underlying sulfides, however, are much larger. They're probably 20 times more resources in the underlying sulfides. They're open, they're expandable, and they're high grade. They're thick, which sets them up easily for underground mining, mechanized mining underground, which means you should be able to pull them out at a fairly substantial rate. So it's the sulfides that are the real win in the project. the oxides are low-hanging fruit, low capital, low operating cost, good starter, gets us set up for logistics and supply lines in country, gets staff trained in preparation for going underground on the larger resource.
Okay, so there's a game plan. Going after the oxides, get some cash flowing, and I'll give you time to kind of set up in country, and hopefully, free cash flowing relatively quickly. It pays for future exploration and development of the sulfide component. That's the game plan.
That's the game plan, and that also reduces the dilution that shareholders have to face as we go into the underground development. So if we could get that established, then we should be in good shape. The capital is achievable. We can probably do a fair amount of that with debt. Our internal estimates indicate that the payback should be within 1 to 1.5 years. So it can support a fair amount of debt and still have a good reserve tail.
Right. So in a way, you're kind of restricted at the speed at which you could move by definition, right? Because you're going to have to try and get a portion of this financed and into production and producing cash before you can really develop out what you see as the kind of the meat and gravy of this project, which is the sulfides.
Correct. But, remember that the oxide portion does a number of things for us. The first thing it does is it supports the application for a mining license. And I think a mining license is important for de-risking the project. A mining license in the Dominican Republic is granted for 75 years and gives us 75 years of tenure over that block of ground. That's important. The other thing it does for us is supply lines in the Dominican Republic need to be established. We need to set up with suppliers. Most of the critical mining equipment will have to be, imported, as well as reagents and chemicals. So that sets us up. It also allows us to train workforce. So all of that gets done while we are driving underground ramps so that we can assess the underground portion of the deposit. And the underground setup will probably take 18 months to 2 years in any case. It will be 2 to 2.5 kilometers of ramp would need to be put in place so that we can access the underground portion. And that will take time.
Okay.
So the oxides set us up nicely.
No, I get that. What I'm trying to do for people here is give them an idea of what they could be investing into. This isn't necessarily a quick turnaround, but it left alone, throw some cash in and just sit back and leave it alone for 2-3 years. It grows in value over that time. So people in the mines like to understand the kind of the risk profile. They like to understand the return profile as well. So it was just really a question about timing, to be frank and honest with people. Question I want to ask you about, I noticed that Barrick are in country, because I think we talked before about Dominican Republic as a mining jurisdiction, and I think you were very, very positive. But I saw a piece recently, last month actually earlier this month, about the amount of money that, say, someone like Barrick is contributing in country, and they have invested a few billions of dollars. So do you imagine, therefore, it's going to be an easy process to kind of get your permits, get your licenses when you start applying?
I think getting the licenses, will be a relatively easy process. One of the key items, of course, is ensuring that we have a social license to operate, which means that we've got to do the education and address any issues that come up from the population, the communities, and the stakeholders that are involved. That's underway now, so that early in the new year, we should have a good social framework together. I think that's the key for the government being able to grant the mining concessions. You said that Barrick's in country. There's no question they are. They've taken a very prominent role since COVID knocked the tourism industry out of the country. Barrick has been able to make advanced tax payments and advanced royalty payments, which has helped the government out immensely in times when they need hard currency. Barrick at one time, or the Pueblo Viejo mine, contributed about 20% of the tax revenues to the government. That number is probably double or triple at this point in time, since there's no tax revenues coming in from tourism. So the government's realizing just how important mining is in the country. They'd like to promote it. They've said that repeatedly. They'd like to see new mines put into production as quickly as possible. We went over that in our last interview, Matt, about the government wishing us to move to a mining license as quickly as possible. We're on that path. With Barrick being in country, they've got $7 billion in installed infrastructure in the country. I don't think they're going anywhere quickly, but they do only have a 10 to 12-year mine life at this point. So at some point with that existing infrastructure, I think they'll be looking for new resources in country. But we there are a number of deposits that are known, and I think the government would like to see those developed as well.
And they've picked up a bit of land next door to you, haven't they?
Well, they have. They're anyone's free to stake ground in the Dominican Republic. We're almost at our limit on what we can assess. But yes, Barrick's moved out and started exploration in the country, and looking to increase their resource base.
Okay. No, we're making no assumptions on that, are we? No assumptions.
You'll have to speak to Barrick to find out what their intentions are in country. But I'm sure they'd like to do exploration. I'm sure they realize that the Torillo Belt is pregnant with gold, and the systems there can be large. So obviously they're willing to spend some time and money to look at it.
Okay. And what have you got lined up for the rest of? Well, there's not much left for the rest of this year. I assume it's drilling. But what have you got lined up for the rest of your capital that you've got available to you?
Well, there's a number of things that we'll be doing this year. Obviously, drilling. We won't stop the drills. We've got 2 drills turning now. We had a bit of difficulty waiting for assays to come back so that we could target new drill holes. But in November, we'll be mobilizing 2 more drills in the field, and we'll have 4 drills turning in order to expand this as quickly as possible. In addition to doing that drilling, we will complete the economic studies on the oxide portion of the deposit. We have started a scoping study on the underground to see what the capital cost would look like and what ramp positioning would look like, and to see how we can conceptually extract this material underground. And then early next year, we'll do a resource upgrade on the sulfides and put out a new resource estimate in the sulfides, which should dovetail nicely with the scoping study, so we can understand perhaps how we access and extract the material underground. So all of those things are coming, as well as continual drill results over the next year. And we're quite excited about the drilling, and quite excited about what we see in the core box. We're just waiting for help from the lab to understand what the grades look like and what the thicknesses are.
Okay, I don't think there's much more we can talk about until you've got some more of these drill results back, because you'll be able to tell us more about what you think you've got. But you listed on the OTCQX back in September. Doesn't seem to have had an impact for you. Is that sort of because of the lack of marketing and promotion on your part?
I think that's probably correct. We haven't done a lot of promotion in the U.S. to U.S. clients. We got the listing activated simply to set us up for doing that. Our intention between now and the end of the year is to do a lot more active marketing in the U.S. and to find U.S. investors. We'll be doing that over the next 4 to 6 months. Okay. I'm hoping that we'll see increased volumes there.
Okay. Do you think you can compete? Like you said right at the beginning, there's so much noise. It's like any project that's got the word gold associated with it seems to be having money thrown at it. And it's very confusing for, I was going to say Robin Hood investors, but it is confusing for them, but it's very confusing for even gold bugs, because there's a lot of stories out there. I mean, why should people be interested in you guys?
Well, the way I like to put it, the way we differentiate ourselves is, first of all, if you are an investor that wants to buy a company that may get taken out in this cycle or may be able to develop a mine in this cycle, then you need to look for projects that have been around for at least 1 or 2 cycles previously. The nature of exploration these days, and we touched on this in our last interview, Matt, is such that you can't expect to have an exploration discovery in this cycle and have something go into production and complete all the environmental and engineering and community relations work that you need to do to get into production in this cycle. Most things that you'll see developed take at least 2 or 3 gold cycles. So if you're an investor, you should really be looking for those projects that have been around for a while, because those are the ones that are most advanced and most likely to move quickly. The second thing that I'd look at is it's always difficult for investors to understand what drill results mean. And I see a large number of drill results that are coming from companies where, you've got 500 grams over half a meter, which suddenly turns into, when they report it, turns into, 20 grams over 10 meters. They're not the same. From an economic standpoint, from a mining standpoint, to extract a half a meter vein, you need men and wheelbarrows. To extract a 10-meter wide vein, you need mechanized machinery underground. Mining rates are much higher. Mining costs are much lower for wide, broad intercepts. That's something that I like to bring up when we look at the intercepts that we're getting at Unigold and at Candelones. These are 9 or 10 meters of consistent mineralization from hanging wall to footwall. They're not high-grade hits that get smeared out. This is consistent 10-meter wide to 20 to 30-meter wide intercepts. For instance, in August, when we put out a 30-meter intercept at 9 grams, we published the meter-by-meter assays from that. It's on our website. You can look at the press release. It was in the back of the press release. But every assay over that 30-meter interval ran between 4 grams and I think the high was 19 grams. But very consistent mineralization. That just means that it's most likely economic. Mining's easy. As far as dilution is concerned, it's minimal. It's usually visual for mining, and you can use large mechanized equipment. So I think that's what differentiates us, and I think investors should be aware when they're looking at some of these narrow high-grade hits. They may not be economic. The other point about narrow high-grade hits is when you do a resource estimate, they disappear. They get cut back, and they don't have a large sphere of influence. They don't get, they don't move anymore than about 5 meters away from the hit. So the perceived ounces disappear quickly. Whereas what we're seeing in the Dominican Republic are broad, consistent hits of mineralization, which mean that when we come to do the resource estimate, they won't disappear. There probably won't be any cutting involved. Ultimately, from an economic standpoint, that's what I want to see. I want to make it easy. I don't want to make it hard. Mother Nature's helped us here. All we have to do now is prove to the market, which is the human part of the engineering, that this thing will be economic and can be economic.
Joseph, brilliant. We have to get you back on to do some analysis for us of drill reporting. So how it's going to help people, because we say, we know it because we're analysts, but for the average investor looking at these very long, boring tables, it's difficult to interpret, and the headline is sometimes the easiest thing to go to. And as a promoter or a CEO, sometimes they go for the easy option too and pick out the thing that looks good. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Appreciate that.
Yes.
Okay, well, look, stay in touch, because the key thing here is people understand your plan, 2-stage plan, go after the oxide and the cash flow, and then develop the sulfide component, because it's a much bigger prize. That will take some time, but you're going through a process. That's great. And second thing is that you've got to do some drilling now and get more data out into the market, as Assay Labs allowing. So stay in touch more regularly and let us know how you're getting on, please.
Will do. And keep an eye out for the results that are coming. Now that we've got the assay pipeline full, we expect to get results on a regular basis. So we'll just keep drilling, keep the drills going.